Hi, this is Skip Bayless. I just finished an interview with Kara, and it was simply the most interesting, gratifying, rewarding, intriguing interview I've ever done. And I've done a whole lot of interviews in my time.
This is Really Famous. I'm Kara Mayer Robinson, and I interview famous people. But I don't just interview them like your typical interview. I'm not really interested in those same old questions. Instead, I like to know who they really are and what they really think. Sometimes it's like listening to old friends catching up, and other times it's like eavesdropping on a therapy session. Today's guest is Skip Bayless. Skip is an award-winning journalist, an author, and a TV personality. He currently hosts the sports opinion and debate show Skip and Shannon Undisputed with his co-host Shannon Sharpe. It airs on Fox Sports 1 every weekday morning. Before that, Skip was on ESPN as the host of Cold Pizza and then First Take. Side note, Skip's brother is the talented and well-known chef Rick Bayless. So Skip and I met through his wife, Ernestine Sclafani Bayless, who, by the way, just published a book called Balls: How to Keep Your Relationship Alive When You Live with a Sports-Obsessed Guy, which has a chapter written by Skip and contributions from some of their celebrity friends like Michael Rapaport and Billy Bob Thornton. You'll hear Ernestine a little bit in the background. She was with us for the first part of our conversation. So, an unexpected thing happened. When I wrapped up our interview and rolled the camera to record a quick bonus Q&A for my YouTube channel, which of course you know by now, it's at youtube.com/reallyfamous, we suddenly got into a deep talk about his childhood and how it impacted who he is today. Often when I do these videos, the conversation gets a little lighter and sillier, and that's great and that's fine, but not this time. It opened up a much bigger discussion about so much more that we didn't get into earlier. You'll hear me say, okay, let's do a video. It'll be about 3 minutes, but it wasn't 3 minutes. You'll see. I'm so glad it happened because I do feel like I got to know Skip a lot more after that, and I think you will too. And here's what else I loved about talking to Skip. He's like me in a way. He's very interested in who he's talking to. Curious, attentive, has lots of questions. We spent the first 15 or 20 minutes talking about me, actually. He wanted to know how I got into podcasting, writing, my background as a therapist, how I met my husband, my kids, how I felt when I worked at different jobs like Comedy Central. It was great. I love that. So here we are, picking up after I gave him basically a full history of me, my career path, and my life. Yeah. But it's interesting turning it a little bit away from me and a little towards you, because when I see you doing your show, I recognize something about the way that you are with your guests that feels like I can relate to that. I'm not comparing myself to you, but I'm saying I identify that you are very much interested in what everybody has to say. You're not jumping in to talk about what you want to say. And you really seem to be hearing what they're saying in the moment, which I'm sure you know that you do that. But I don't think that's that common.
Should I talk to this?
Go, please.
So remember how I got my start? Newspaper journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I considered myself my I don't want to say my greatest strength. My strength was interviewing early on and writing long profiles. And at 20, I started at the Miami Herald for just about 2 years. Then I came here to the LA Times. In the days, the LA Times was a daily magazine. It was huge. It felt like a Sunday paper delivered on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I could barely pick it up off the doorstep. And we had endless newspaper space, which today would be unheard of. It was the death of the newspapers, obviously, as we knew them. But I could write 5,000 word, which you're aware of, newspaper pieces, profiles, or investigative pieces that they would jump like 7 times through the sports section, to be continued, continued. And in those days we called it jumping. So it would start on page 1 and it would go to page 4 and then it would go to 8 and it would finish on 12 of the sports section. And they would send me all over the country and give me a week or 2 to do a profile on X, Y, or Z. And my strength, I thought, was interviewing. I could also write, thank you God, but it started in interviewing. That was the genesis of all this. And yet the show I do now and have done since 2004 is not guest driven. We just have guests every once in a while, and sometimes we have A-list guests, but there are a lot of days when we have no guests because most people come to us for the debate. But I do like to probe and make the interviewee aware immediately that I'm really interested in what they're saying, because most people really aren't. So I appreciate you picked up on that.
Totally picked up on that. And I see it and I'm like, not only with Shannon, but with anybody who you will have on. By the way, yesterday I turned it on. It was Michael Rapaport.
It's funny.
He's been on my show too.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And in fact,
cool.
I did a piece for the Times with him. Did you see that? Do you remember? So you lived in New York for a while.
We have 10 years.
Did you live in New York or you lived in Connecticut? You lived in New York and commuted to Connecticut,
Both.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
I commuted or reverse, however you want to say
Yeah.
it. We sort of went back and forth. But did we do it for 10 years? I believe for 10 years. We had an apartment in New York City. I met her my second year in New York, 2005. And then our show was moved up to Bristol. It was in New York to start, and then it was moved up to Bristol, Connecticut. So we had a huge decision to make. So she had a good job. She stayed, lived in our place during the week, and I just took a car service up to Connecticut on Sunday night and came back on Friday afternoon, God and traffic willing. And I lived for 10 years in the Residence Inn in Bristol, Connecticut.
Wow,
10 years,
really?
and I actually liked it. And she would sometimes come up on the weekend.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the interviewing, for sure, I look at you, I'm like, this is good, this is genuine. So you knew right off the bat that was your thing. When I was writing, I realized that too, that the interviewing was my strength, for
we do
sure.
have that in common.
Yes.
Because I always felt like I could get someone to open up if you would give me enough time and the right circumstance.
Well, that's the whole thing, by the way. In enough time, right? So sometimes somebody will pitch me someone and say, oh, they only have 20 minutes or a half hour. And I really have to pass. And I usually do.
I would agree.
It does not work for me. That's not the kind of interviewer I am. And it takes a little while to connect and to feel like you can forget about yourself for a little bit. And
Agreed.
I did accept a couple recently. I did one with Henry Winkler because he was on a book tour.
Saw him at Nate Nell's a month or so.
Really?
A couple of months.
So we have a lot of people in common then.
And
he was in New York on a book tour, and I had been trying to
did a children's book.
Yeah, a children's book, but he's done a lot.
Yeah.
It's called Alien Superstar. It's a children's book, and he was just doing one of these rapid fire book tours. So we didn't have time for the whole podcast. So his publicist said, I said, well, I'll do a video. I guess we could do a video, and then we'll do the whole podcast later when in LA or something. But I left thinking he's great, but it wasn't right for me. I needed more time. It's just a different.
Yeah. If you had 2 hours with him, he would have a lot to say.
Yes.
Incredible.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so when you're not working, are you doing the same thing? Like when you meet somebody out, let's say at a party or something, are you sitting there getting the full story?
I talk sports for a living, and most people talk it for entertainment and escape. And so if I'm out, as she knows, the last thing I want to do is talk sports. So if we're with maybe your friends and we do a dinner or lunch, I want to know about them, and I don't want to talk about sports. So I would rather probe where they came from and who they are and why they are. So I would say that would always be the case, right?
Yeah, I feel that too.
In fact, in the beginning, the biggest reason I chose her is because she didn't know anything about sports. And it would give me a salvation because we really clicked on movies, TV shows, music, everything clicked except sports, which was perfect for me because now I can look forward to Friday night as date night, and I have to watch some sports, and obviously she has tried to learn how to watch a little, sometimes a lot, depending on what the sport is, but what do we like to do the most is watch Jeopardy.
Jeopardy.
We watched 5 straight Jeopardies. Did you see Jeopardy James is back? Did you read that? Okay. So we do that every Friday night, and we just binge watched Jack Ryan on Amazon.
The second season, right? The new season?
It was sensational.
I also think John Krasinski is so talented. I'm so happy to see him. He was so great in The Office, but like to see his success since then.
From The Office to that?
Amazing. And it's not just acting. Like he's a filmmaker now. So he made a movie called The Quiet Place or A Quiet Place, I forget. Really good.
I couldn't get somebody near me to watch A Quiet Place.
Oh, because it's
no, too scary.
Scary. It's not depressing. It was scary, and like it's the whole thing is there's no sound. And it was really well done. I mean, I don't think it was his story. I think he bought the rights or something. But it was really very scary and well done. It was an excellent movie. And I'm not a horror movie person.
And his wife started. Yeah.
She started it too.
Wow.
Oh, you said something I wanted to go back to and I forgot what it was. Okay, so talking about Ernestine, this is how I got to you, is through her. So we were in contact and we were talking about her book. So this is how I knew I'd be okay because she doesn't do sports. By the way, let me just bring it full circle though. I saw you guys some interview clips that you did about the book, which by the way, for everybody, it's called Balls. Remind me of the second part. Balls.
How to keep your relationship alive with a sports obsessed, when you live with a sports obsessed guy.
Okay. So you've been doing a little bit of a media circuit. So the two of you have gone on together, and I saw a few of them, and I have to say that's exactly what I'm talking about in terms of people who aren't really listening. I don't mean to criticize them, but I kept wanting to hear more from both of you. Like here you are, here you have these two interesting people right there, but it's like they're kind of stumbling over themselves. They're just talking over each other, and it's more about them than it is their guests. Did you feel that way?
Occasionally. It was rushed and disjointed and sort of out of sequence and out of sync and crazed, but we enjoyed all of them.
Yeah, it's good to be able to do it.
It was.
You're happy to do them. I just wish they would have given you a little more.
And I was seriously so proud of Ernestine for pulling this off because she had no background in this whatsoever. She'd done a little bit of TV, but not a lot. And the first huge success was she came on my show on a Friday, and when I first broached the idea with my superiors, they were a little skeptical, like, I don't know, this is hard, because live TV, it just goes so fast, and our format is so crazed and combative, and how would she fit in it? And so they said, well, maybe you should try a few other ones, just and we did, I don't know, 3 or 4, but she also started doing, how many did you do, 4 or 5 maybe? And every time I watched one or heard about one or saw a clip of one, I'd say, wow, that's really good, because she was completely at ease, completely natural, and incredibly expressive, and she was just Ernestine, the live wire on live TV or radio. And I said, this will work. And I told them, Charlie, our boss, Charlie Dixon, we can do this. And it was one of the highest rated quarter hours in our history, was Ernestine's quarter.
Look at that.
And it came, I was a wreck. It was the only time I've ever been nervous in my career. But I was nervous for her, and I was I was nervous. I know you weren't at all, but I was nervous for my partner Shannon because I wasn't sure how he was going to fit in this flow, and he was great and she was greater, and I just sort of went along for the ride, and I was able to control the flow of the narrative, unlike all the other live shows that we do. And we had a plan, but it was still an unscripted plan. I didn't tell her what to say. We just had
Like an outline?
just a little bit, and we went over it the night before. I said, well, let's start here, and then let's go here, here, and I had some clips pulled so that we could demonstrate, because we have this big thing about jinx demons, where she jinxes my games, and we pulled 2 plays that she jinxed that had happened fairly recently that our audience would really be in tune with, and we demonstrated back and forth how she ruined 2 of my games. And her line is always, how could I, in Century City on the west side of LA, influence a game being played at Soldier Field in Chicago, Illinois? Right. Well, you can't. You did. Powerful. Yep.
So it all went smoothly. Everybody, probably you weren't the only one who was nervous, but she is a natural, I think, on TV for
She's
sure.
A natural.
Her personality comes through, which
does.
Not everybody can pull that off. I mean, yeah.
I wasn't shaking, but
The producer said after, this is the only time I've ever
Okay, you're off mic though. So if you're, we need to put the mic over when you're gonna, because nobody's gonna be able to hear you, and it's gonna sound
okay.
weird. Like what?
So I can let you talk. It doesn't bother me.
It's okay. You know.
No. Say your.
The producer said this was the only time she had ever seen Skip nervous after a show, that he was just so relieved that it was totally over with.
I was shaken by it.
But really, so in your whole career, that's the first time?
I've been anxious for various clashes I've had on the air, but I've never been flat out scared, and I was scared on this one.
So let's talk about the show a little bit. I'm curious about the fact that, so I know that you are on East Coast time a lot, right? You pretty much live on East Coast time?
I live on East Coast time.
So you really set your clocks to...
Everywhere.
Wait, get out of here. Your watch is set to Eastern Standard Time right now? And yours is too?
Always. My clock's in my bedroom where I sleep, and I can't sleep with her on weeknights because I get up at 2 a.m. LA time, and the only way I can survive 2 a.m. LA time is to remind myself or live in the moment of, well, it's 5 o'clock in the East, and that's when I always got up for the other show I did, First Take, and they're up, I got to get up. The only way I can psychologically survive the beating of 2 a.m. is just to trick myself into, it's 5 a.m. and everybody gets up at 5.
Yeah, because not everybody gets up at 5, I'm just saying.
True. But nobody gets up at 2.
Right.
Nobody.
Except, I guess, people on like morning shows.
Like that.
But most of them live in the time on the Eastern time zone,
East Coast morning show people,
they're East Coast.
they don't get up at 2, do they?
No.
3.
So, so walk me through it then. Your alarm goes off at 2, and then what?
I jump out of bed. I have my workout clothes laid out on the floor beneath my bed, which she thinks I'm out of my mind, but that's how I do it. And I jump into my workout clothes, and then I jump in front of my computer to frantically read the overnight stories just to make sure I didn't miss anything while I did sleep for my little 5 hours, and maybe read the game story or 2 off the very late NBA games, because now we've got LeBron James in the West, so that's really hard on on my psyche and frankly on my health, because it seems like every other night there's a LeBron West Coast game, which pushes me, because in the East it was just as bad. People said, oh, well, you'll be in the West, it'll be easier. No, it's not. It's exactly the same, because the show's still going to start at the very same time it used to start, except now it's a half hour earlier. So I read the LeBron game story maybe, or any backstories or sidebar stories, and I stretch. And by 2:30, I've gone through here and up the stairs into our loft where the treadmill is, and I get on the treadmill and I watch one full loop of, it's the 2 a.m. Sports Center on ESPN. It's the highlight show. And I pick it up midway because it's 2:30, but it just loops. So I'm going to be able to get the full loop of the highlights. which is incredibly beneficial, so I can completely catch up on any little thing that I missed. And they do lean on me to sort of executive produce the show, in as much as I choose most, if not all, of the topics. And I'm constantly looking for the very hottest issues upon which Shannon and I disagree authentically. So there's nothing contrived about it. There's nothing tricked up. But the way the night works is that I go through the list that one of our young producers sends out, and I cull it down to maybe 20 topics that I think could work for us, that would be kind of pet topics, or I could see where there could be some conflict or disagreement. And then I call the main producer and say, hey, I like these, and here are my quick capsule opinions on these, a yay or a nay, pro, con. And he says, okay, I got it. And then he calls Shannon and bounces those topics I've selected off Shannon to get his quick takes, types them up, sends them back to me so I can say, like that one? That doesn't really work. We actually agree on that one, so it's not a must-do topic, so let's throw that one out, or at least put it over on the side. And I'm still, that process, the wheels are still turning while I'm watching the overnight Sports Center, thinking, there's another possibility. Maybe we could do that one or that one. And then I finish at 3:30-ish, and I literally run in the kitchen and I get my drinks for the morning and my breakfast material, and I take my vitamins and I run across this floor into my weeknight bedroom, and I jump in the shower and try to get my hair in some semblance of condition for the show. And then...
Wait, you do your own hair for the show?
No.
All right, you're prepping it.
A woman named Nusheen is just great. But I have to get it, because I don't give her much of a shot. She gets like 2 minutes right before I go on. So I have to get it in some shape where she can make it perfect, And then I throw on more workout clothes for post-show, because I usually go lift weights after the show. And this saintly woman sitting next to me is always sitting where you're sitting when I come out the door, because she gets up to walk me to the door, which I greatly appreciate. And this whole exchange is going to last a minute maybe, because I'm barely going to make it to the meeting on time. But she walks me to the door. How did you sleep? Well, how did you sleep? What do you got going today? What do you got going today? Is there anything going on? Nah, nothing really that you'd care about. And
that is really, okay.
And she walks me all the way to the elevator door, and she always says, I heard cops out there, be careful. She always says that. That's the last thing she said. I heard cops, be careful.
So funny.
We're only, as we sit here, with no traffic, which never happens except at 5 minutes till 4 in the morning. There's no traffic on Olympic. There's no traffic on Avenue of the Stars. So I can go pretty fast, and I can make it.
Because Fox Studios are right here.
They're just right down Avenue of the Stars to Pico, which are just right there. It's 2 minutes or sometimes less.
It's what time, by the way? So
it's
we're 4:30?
Right at 4.
To 4.
Mm-hmm. And our meeting's supposed to start at 4, but I let everybody have 5 minutes. I tell our producer, and he gets a great kick out of this. I want everybody to get their good mornings out of the way, their how's the weather, can you believe the fires, and wherever they are, and talk non-meeting talk, because I am 1,000% all business when I walk in, because the clock is ticking. I do say a quick good morning, but I wish I didn't have to do that. I just do that because that's sort of required of humans to say good morning.
You would be a little bit like social or diplomatic or something.
Right. But we start as soon as I walk in at 5 after 4, and we have a pretty good idea of where we're going to go. But occasionally there are late breaking stories where I need to put him on some spot that I hate to put him on, but just to say, hey, just give me a quick take on that. Yes or no? Which way are you going? And as soon as he tells me, I'm good. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know the why of it. I don't want him to use his ammo or to reveal his ammo.
Right, because that would ruin it.
It would ruin
Yeah.
it, and well, it would help me immensely. So we keep our cards very close to the vest in the meeting because we're going to try to beat each other to a pulp on the air.
So what about when you have a guest coming in and they have to cut their call time is super early? That must be a thing, right? Like they have to be up for that. What time do they come in? And how do you
We try to
find
reserve
them?
our guest slots for the final hour just for their sake.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to come in at 6:30 or 7 or 7:30. So it's usually between 8 and 9. And their call time is 30 minutes before, and randomly they don't make it 30 minutes before. And as you know, the morning traffic here can be completely unpredictably awful. And many times they will literally run in the door and run on the air.
Really?
We've had several of those.
So
you know.
like they don't get time for the hair,
No
the
makeup.
makeup, the whole thing.
And a lot of them don't care.
They don't.
No,
They're not vain.
Most of them love our show if they know our show, and they're just happy to be there, and they're happy to be out of the LA traffic. And the ones who are repeat guests know that we're good to them. We don't ambush. We don't bushwhack. We don't go for the throat. We'll ask hard questions, but they're fair, and mostly they want to be in what we call our barbershop.
So you've sparked some friendships over the
like
years.
Ice Cube.
Like real
I'm
outside
in
of
awe
TV.
of Ice Cube because NWA is just like so groundbreaking. We saw the movie. Son played him, and Straight Outta Compton is one of my all-time favorites. And trust me, Lil Wayne Carter, I consider one of my closest friends in the world, and he knows me and I know him because we know each other's hearts. We're about as different as you could imagine. We're from opposite ends of the earth, but we text almost every day about something. We talk constantly. When he's got some issue he wants to try to resolve in his head, he'll call me and kick it around with me. Well, this is what happened with this show. It's all because of the common ground that is that show. Oh, well, Billy Bob's a whole nother issue.
Right. So these are also people who have written, who wrote for Ernestine's book. They did some tips too.
That is true
as well.
No, that's a good point.
Right.
Well,
Billy Bob Thornton is another one who I recognize his name
now
from
we've
the book.
gone to the other opposite end of the earth, and yet he came on our show when. No, he didn't come. He just loved our show so much. This is when I was on ESPN's First Take, and we came out here for what's called ESPY Week in LA in the summer in July. And randomly, I didn't even know, one of our bookers crossed over with his manager, and he randomly comes on our show. Well, I'm a huge fan because he's a genius. I mean, I don't know if you know his work, Sling Blade.
Of course. I mostly have actors on my show, so
okay, you know.
I get it.
He won the Academy Award for Sling Blade, and he's just so gifted. He can go so many directions. Bad Santa, and I can just go on and on. He brought
Fargo.
his book onto the show that he wrote, his autobiography, and he signed it to me because he was a big fan, and I'm in awe that he would be in awe. And I took the book home to the Residence Inn in Bristol, Connecticut, and I started reading it, and I couldn't stop. And I kept calling Ernestine saying, God, I relate to his life so much because he grew up in small town Arkansas. I grew up in the city, in Oklahoma City, but there's some parallels to the background and the conflicts, parents and whatnot. And then Ernestine, for my birthday, somehow contacted him and told him how much I loved his book, and could he join us for dinner for my birthday as a surprise. Yeah, so he couldn't do it because he was in Calgary, Canada, shooting Fargo, and he created a video. It somehow didn't work, but the sentiment of it, the thought of it was just astounding to me. So then we arranged a phone call, and we started talking on the phone and just completely hit it off. And then a week later, he says, could you call me back? I want to bounce something off you. Okay. And I hope he doesn't mind me telling this one, but he's shooting Fargo, and he's at a crossroads in his career. And he said, look, I don't know where to go because I've tried my own. He did this, you won't know, Jane Mansfield's Car. He wrote it, directed it, and starred in it, and got he got Robert Duvall, and who else was in that? Yeah, there's some big, sort of former A-list actors who love Billy Bob that were in this, but it wasn't a commercial success. So he says, I'm in a crossroads. And I said, well, what are you doing right now? What is this? Because I didn't know what it was. And he said, it's Fargo. And I said, it's off the movie? Well, kind of it's off the movie, but not really. It's a whole new direction of it.
Right, it sounded like a terrible idea.
He was telling me on the phone. I said, I don't know about this one. And I said, well, what do the dailies look like? And he told me, he said, it's probably not going to work. It's a little crazy. It's way out there. Okay. Well, Lorne Malvo was his character, who was evil, and he won the Emmy for that. Well, anyway, so he's telling me from Calgary, Canada, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know where to go. What do you think I should do? And I'm thinking, I'm throwing out ideas. You could try this or that. Well, all of that was moot because he was little did he know, he was about to win the Emmy and just launch into Goliath, for which I don't remember if he won the Emmy. Did he win the Emmy for Goliath? I don't know, but it's sensational.
But Fargo was major and so good, and he was so good in it. And but who would have known, right? Like, I would give him the same advice. Like, oh, really? That doesn't sound very good at all.
Well, and he didn't love it either. Well, what's the old line about Hollywood? Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows. Or they just keep making the same hit movie over and over, but you can't because the second one won't work and the third one is probably a worse idea. So who knows what will click and what will hit and what won't.
What do you think of this whole Scorsese and superheroes conflict? Do you know about this, where Scorsese said something about that it's not really cinema, that all of these superhero movies, and so it's really like people are a little bit split, I guess, and I think it has a lot to do with what kind of movies they like.
We go to the superhero movies, but I'm probably not qualified to make this statement, but I am on Scorsese's side on this one. Those are comic books made into movies, and he makes films to me, and I can't wait to see this.
The Irishman?
The Irishman.
But you appreciate both?
Hugely. We go to all the
So you go to the
superhero
movies.
I wasn't a comic book fan, so I'm not Comic-Con.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with comic books. I rejected it. I didn't care.
What did you do when you were growing up? Like, what was your thing?
Sports.
Oh, of course. Of course it was sports.
Because sports is the best reality show TV on TV. Because it's real, live reality show. There's nothing scripted about it. The outcomes are wildly unpredictable. And I knew from the start I loved to see humans get put in the ultimate crucible of testing mental and physical toughness this side of war. It's not war, but it's the closest approximation to war is a nationally televised, high-stakes football, basketball, baseball, golf match for all the marbles, because you find out what a man or woman is truly made of in that crucible. And I know that because on my little levels, I got tested coming up in sports. And so I knew how that felt, and I knew how it felt to fail. And I'm fascinated to the point of obsessed with watching real, live reality TV sports battles.
So let me ask you about social media too. I'm curious about that. So you have a nice social media following. Are you the one doing it? Looks like you are.
Every single.
So you're posting yourself a lot of times with sneakers, right? So do you like it?
Part of it is to promote the show, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm not by nature a self-promoter. I just know how much it drives show viewership to make them feel a part of the process. And I was naturally gifted with an opinion mechanism that's real and raw, because as a little kid, I would watch carefully and closely what was happening and turn to whoever's in the room and say, I can't believe that happened. And most people don't watch the games quite that way, that I'm looking deeper into the process of how could that lead to that. And so I enjoy Twitter especially because it's more my medium, and I like to live tweet because it's a test of my skill and my acumen and my ability to react with immediacy, and my writing skill, because it takes some writing skill to write that quickly and concisely and hopefully accurately. You have to be able to spell, on cue, because you don't have time to spell check those things. I know it comes up some spell check, but some names, you better get it right. And I think it is a strength of mine. So that's fun for me.
So that's the
a
platform
challenge.
you feel best with because it suits you.
Yeah. IG is self-promotion, I feel like, and it's more ego mania, and I don't have that gear in me that way. Look what I'm doing, look what I'm wearing. But I do love my Jordans, which I wear every day, but I go all black every Friday, and I don't know what possessed me, but we started, was it 3 years ago? And I just, off the top of my head, came up with the caption, I can't lose in these shoes, and they're always Jordans. And then I say MJ forever, and then the weirdest, wildest thing that's ever happened to me happened thanks to my friend Lil Wayne, because in August he randomly surprised us on the show by giving us, what would you call them? Their necklaces, their chains, their chains, gold chains, with each of the three of us, including Jenny Taft and Shannon Sharpe, a necklace with our names that hang down, and mine obviously says Skip.
So what about, I have two questions that are stirring right now.
Okay.
One is, what about detractors? Because you've got detractors too. So, I mean, I'm sure everybody's asked you this a million times, but what's your thing? What's your take?
I just ignore them. I know I have strong opinions, and so do all of those detractors, and I respect all that. I actually honor all that they would feel strongly enough to react that strongly to me, but I don't read any of it. When Twitter first started, I made the mistake for about 6 months. What year was that? 2009, I think it was. For the first 6 months of Twitter, and we were all encouraged at ESPN to join Twitter and to use Twitter because they thought it was a self-promotional tool, could serve the show well. And so for 6 months, I clicked on my ats or my mentions or what I would call my responses. And I would do so after every show. And I felt myself being pulled over the edge and down the maelstrom into that living hell of hatred that is the internet. And it might be one random comment from somebody in Iowa or the state of Washington or Alaska or who knows, maybe in England. I don't know, it could come from anywhere. India. One random comment about your hair sucked today would stick in my psychological craw for the rest of the night. And I'd start thinking, I don't know, should I do something different with my hair? Should I let it grow? Should I cut it? I don't know.
Well, of course you would feel like that.
And it would start to gnaw at me and distract me until finally I woke up one day and said, I don't need this. It gets me nowhere. And I will not name names, but I have worked with several people at both networks, I believe, began to fail in their TV career because they became Twitter, Instagram, whatever, social media victims because they couldn't stop reading their responses, especially in commercial breaks.
Oh, that's
it's
not
death
good.
on TV.
Right, it's not good for what they're trying to do. It gets in there.
It gets in there, and you start becoming a prisoner of their thoughts, their opinions of you, to the point that you start letting them define you. You start to become who they say you should be. How can you think that? Well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should think the way you think.
So now you don't read anything.
I
So
don't
even
read
when you
anything.
tweet, because that's a big thing on Twitter, is like engagement. People have a conversation, but
Don't
you're
do
just
it.
putting your thoughts out there and you don't read the responses.
I don't read one of them.
Okay. So do you ever waver or feel self-doubt, insecurity? Does that creep in ever? I mean, because you're human.
I am. I honestly don't.
Never?
No. Are you talking about my opinions on the show?
No, I'm talking about in real life. How am I doing okay? Self-doubt comes in so many shapes and
It does.
forms that I don't want to create one for
No.
you.
I take ratings way too seriously, but it's what we do. It's the game I chose. We play the ratings game, and if we have an off day, I feel doubt. I don't feel doubt, I feel anger. I feel I'm furious. And fortunately, it only drives me to work harder and try harder the following day, to a fault probably, because she would say, you got to back off. You got to give yourself a break, because you can only do as much as you do, and then you just have to let the ratings chips fall. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and that's true, but I can't always accept that because I am a psycho competitor. I am fiercely driven to succeed, and so I just get mad at it. And I don't know if that qualifies as doubt.
Well, you know what it is? It reminds me a little bit of what you're saying with the social media, too. Like, you have to watch out for that. You don't want that to really creep in.
Don't let it creep in.
To the point where
Don't
it's
let it distract
impacting.
you.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know, but you have to keep your eye on that to some degree. But that could be, it could go a little too far if you let it.
The first year of this new show, remember, this show I chose to do after having all-time success on the other show. I chose to join my former producer on First Take here at Fox Sports 1 named Jamie Horowitz, and I chose to take on the juggernaut that I had, you can argue, helped create or just flat out created it myself. And it was a monumental challenge that I didn't have to take because I had it all. I had it. It was a well-oiled machine, and it would have continued to be. But I just needed that challenge. I needed to have to climb that mountain that I had helped sort of create, and we are. Slowly but surely, our ratings have risen all 4 years. But the first year, I didn't look at the ratings because I knew it would be hard. It's virtually impossible to do what we're trying to do. But year 2, I started, and we had a whole lot of success. And you can argue I get addicted to every day at 2 o'clock looking. They come out, and I get the email. I get addicted to completely tearing apart every quarter hour for 2.5 hours, and I do. I mash them with our topics, and I literally say, that topic is not working, whatever that is.
So you really do a post-game analysis.
I do. I break it way down.
But can you do that, though? Or does some of it have to do with something unrelated to what the topic was?
Touche. Our ratings gurus at Fox argue with me all the time. Some of it is inexplicable.
Yeah.
It can be
a distraction in...
It can be a Donald Trump press conference,
right,
or some big breaking news in the quote-unquote real world, a CNN style. What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, weather, bad weather trend, fires. People can tune out just because they want to see what are they saying on the news channels about this. And I can't control that. I obviously can't predict that. And so they say, don't take it to the bank. And they're always about year over year. And we are way up year over year. We're in our 4th year, but that's the only time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get that. I could see that.
That's it.
So let me ask you my last question. You ready for it? It's 2 parts.
Okay.
So one is, how do you think the world sees Skip Bayless?
Honestly, I don't know, and I don't care. I'm the worst to ask about that. I know how I see, but I don't know how the world sees. And it's in part because I don't seek that out. I just know how I define myself, and it's often not the way most people seem to, or when I hear bits and pieces, or when I'm interviewed and asked about things, I'm always surprised at the question, because I know how I see myself as a truth teller and a crusader for the truth, and a fearless fighter for what I believe in, what I think is right, and I'm completely content in my own skin. So I don't know. I don't know. You'd have a better idea of that, because you've probably read some things in the last 24 hours or the last 2 hours to try to figure this out.
Oh, I thought you meant I read something in you just during this conversation.
Just in researching for your podcast.
Oh, no. So I don't want to figure that out.
Okay.
Because to me, that is the worst thing to do. You know what you can't get in your head, and for me, I know what I can't get in my head. And I can't get too much about what's out there about a person who I haven't met yet. Because to me, it's all about what goes on when I meet that person.
That's true. Well said. That's very good.
So
that's very smart on your part.
I think it's not even a strategy. I think I realize it now, whereas I always have done it, but now I can name it, identify it. I'm learning when I'm with you. It's not about what I've heard before. So I don't want to hear it all.
You're not coming in with a lot of preconceived notions.
Right.
Yeah.
And I try to, if I see them coming towards me, I'm like, or somebody will know that I'm about to interview somebody, and then they'll say, oh, you should ask them about it. And I'm like, I don't even want to know that. Okay. I mean, I do my research, so I know enough.
You do.
But I don't want all of that bogging me down.
Okay.
And I know that I'm going to know intuitively what that person is about.
Very good point.
That's my goal, to bring it out anyway.
That's why you're good at what you do. Because it's different and it's fresh. It's unique.
I really want to know who you are, which is why I like to ask that question. And you answered part B in part A, by the way.
Okay, good.
All right, let's wrap up. What do you think? You want to do a video?
Yes.
Do a short video.
All right.
Thanks.
I am
Skip.
good.
Okay, quick questions. We're going to do like 3 minutes. I think that'll do it.
Okay.
All right. So what was your first job as a teenager? I'm going to assume.
I was forced to work in my father's little hole-in-the-wall barbecue joint on the south side of Oklahoma City from the time I was probably 4 years old until I graduated from high school, and I despised every second of it. I had no aptitude for cooking. My brother used that restaurant as a springboard to become one of the best chefs in America, but I hated it to the point that I didn't know what to do, so I was forced to clean off tables during the lunch rush and sweep out what they call the bullpen, where all the trash cans were. And in the morning, I did some what they called prep work. This is back in the days before, Cuisinarts or whatever, where I actually had to take the butcher knife and chop up green peppers into little pieces for the potato salad. And it all basically ended the day, I nearly cut this finger off with a butcher knife on a wet green pepper that I was not paying much attention to. So that it taught me a lot about perseverance and dedication to a crappy job for which I got paid like $0.25 an hour or whatever.
Nice. So, but your brother, it took.
My brother went on to become a very famous chef in Chicago. He owns a number of restaurants, one of which, called the Topolobampo Room, is Obama's favorite restaurant. And I believe my brother was asked to be the White House chef by Obama during his first term, but my brother couldn't do it because he had too many restaurant responsibilities in his little restaurant empire. but I'm very proud of him. But he used to cook with my father, and I didn't care about cooking, and to this day, I can't boil water in a microwave.
So was that a little bit of a stressor between you and your father?
Everything was a stressor between me and my father. We did not click. We clashed from the start, and the only silver lining was he drove me, without trying, he drove me to become what I am today, that it was all sort of in spite of my father.
That is so interesting. I can't believe we didn't get into that on the whole podcast. That
Well,
we could have gone into
You
for
could keep going if you want.
a
I'm
half
open.
hour.
Yep, you probably could have.
That's so interesting. So you already figured that out a long time ago. This isn't a new revelation for you.
No, but you can't choose your parents. But the irony of this whole situation was my parents made me, not by choice. They just sort of accidentally made me. But I was the oldest, and my mom didn't want kids. She had 3 kids for her mom, and she lived in fear of her mom and lived for her mom's approval. So she didn't even want to be a mother, and that's really hard on the oldest child, because then the oldest child has to experience everything on his own. He has to figure it out on the fly, and at least the second and third kids have some sort of blueprint of, oh, well, this is how he did it, so maybe we should try that. That works instead of that. And yet my mother had huge charisma. She was incredibly egotistical, but in her own good way, where she took over every room she walked into. And I got her nature. I light up for the camera the way she lit up for every room she walked into. So I got that from my mom, and I learned discipline and drive from my father. His was channeled the wrong way. He fell to the bottom of the bottle, and then my mother did too. They were both dangerously drunk most of the time, and my mother saved herself by dragging herself to AA, and she stayed sober the last 30 years of her life, and my father drank himself to death when he was 49 years of age and died of cirrhosis of the liver, where his liver just finally failed. But I couldn't have picked 2 better parents to propel me to where I got. So,
It was the right
so I look at
combo
it as
for
a
you.
blessing
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
weird way, but it was a hard childhood.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it would be
No,
a
it
good
was
combo at all.
No fun.
But there was something about what you could do or needed to do or something that was right
Yeah.
there for you.
Mhm.
So they were drunk most of the time when you were growing up, like all the years?
My father was what they called a functional alcoholic, and my lingering memories are, as soon as he got up, he made himself a drink of vodka and orange juice, and the last thing, he would drive home. I would be working at the restaurant. This is when I was like 6, 7 years old, the barbecue joint called the Hickory House, and he would make himself a vodka and Coke for the drive home in the days of no seat belts, and like, I don't know how we survived, but he could function okay behind the wheel while just a little bit drunk, but always drunk. My mother was more of a fall down drunk, and yet my earliest memories of the parties they threw were, and this is another blessing, my father, as like a party trick, me being the oldest, at 3, 4 years old, would ask me to sip his mixed drink, whatever it was. And of course, I would do the bitter beer face of, like, that's terrible, and everybody would laugh.
Oh.
And it was truly awful to me. It was incredibly sour and disgusting. It was like worse than the worst cough medicine or castor oil that you could take. And so it saved me, because the psychotherapists I had to go to for both my parents, as they tried to beat their alcohol addiction, would always say, you better be careful, because you're double genetically predisposed to alcoholism, because you're just like they are. You got all their genes and their same sort of drive and and issues, and so I didn't drink. And when I was 14, the first therapist asked me first. We had 3 kids, but I was the oldest. Do you drink alcohol? Nope. Will you? Nope. Got no use for it. It was foul to me. So my father inadvertently saved me from myself by feeding me bitter alcohol to make all of their friends laugh. So thank you, Dad, for that one.
I wonder too if not just the taste and the experience, the taste in your mouth, literally and figuratively, turned you off, but also just seeing what was happening.
Because I was the only one in my right mind, and I could see how silly they all looked. And it always horrified me how alcohol completely changed my mother into someone I did not know. And I would say, who is this person? Because she could have 3 sips, and all of a sudden, she's slurring her speech and acting a fool. Like, that's my mother? What's wrong with her? And I thought, that stuff is potent, because that turns you into somebody else. And I don't know if that's who she wanted to become, but she couldn't handle her alcohol at all. And then later in my high school and college years, she would embarrass me at any function. A couple of times, one time I tried to have a New Year's party in college at my house, and she tried to serve us some little snacks, and she's dropping the tray on the floor because she was just falling down drunk, and I was ashamed of her and embarrassed for my friends that they had to watch her because they sort of had grown up with her and knew her as somebody else. So I learned a lot about the evils of alcohol if you can't. I mean, obviously a lot of people are okay in moderation, but I just knew that even though I was about to enter a profession of sports writing, newspaper sports writing, known for alcohol consumption, that I couldn't. And it made early on a lot of my cohorts, my coworkers, a little nervous because they'd, guys just for camaraderie after work at the LA Times, they would ask me, we're all going out for a pop, they might say, post work at the local bar downtown LA. Well, I'm happy to go if I can sip a Diet Coke, but that made them uncomfortable because I'd be the only one in my right mind, and maybe that would be a bad thing. Maybe they couldn't let their hair down, so to speak, around me. So it made it a little uncomfortable early in my career. But as time went on, everybody got a little healthier, sort of mentally and physically, and that wasn't such an issue anymore in my mid years in sports writing as I segued into TV. I think a lot of people were enlightened about the evils of strong drink.
So it was the right timing.
It was
just you were on the tail end of that, because otherwise it could have really derailed things for you.
It would have.
Yeah.
Because I'm completely obsessive compulsive. So whatever I do at 1,000 miles an hour. And if I started drinking, I would probably drink 1,000 miles an hour. And and I know where that would lead.
Yeah. So you don't pick up a drink ever?
Ever.
Have you ever?
I tried once. I married my high school sweetheart, which was a mistake, but I still love her, like she's like my sister. But when I first got to the LA Times, she said, maybe you need to ingratiate yourself a little more. Maybe you need to show them that you'll try a little bit. So she said, I'm going to buy a bottle of wine, and I want you to just try sipping wine and see if you can handle, not to handle the alcohol, but handle the taste. Let's try red or white. Let's see which one you could sip. And so I did, and I decided I can barely tolerate red wine. So this is a true, quick, funny story. I would go out occasionally with people, and I would get one glass and maybe sip it twice just to demonstrate to the table, I'm joining in here. But I really despised it, and I had no use for it, and it didn't do anything to me. But I covered the great Joe Namath. I don't know if you remember Joe Namath.
Of course.
Okay.
Even I know Joe Namath.
Well, then good. Everybody knows Joe Namath.
Plus he was on the Brady
him
Bunch.
At the end of his, what's that?
Plus he was on the Brady Bunch.
Oh, God, he was. Well,
Yeah.
that really
He came out to the
qualifies him as a star. Yeah.
You know.
She loves Ernestine loves the Brady Bunch.
Same.
She should have talked about
I
that.
had Peter Brady on the show last year.
Wow.
I'll
That
tell
is
her
huge.
later.
She knows all the trivia, all
Yeah.
the details, every episode, the football in the face episode.
Yes.
She
Oh,
knows
my
everything.
nose. We'll bond
Okay.
over that.
I don't know it that well.
Okay, so Joe Namath.
Joe Namath came to the Rams at the very end of his career, and he was a shell of himself because his knees were a wreck. But the owner of the Rams, named Carol Rosenblum, just wanted a gate attraction. I've got Joe Namath for his final year. And I clicked with Joe, and he liked me and didn't like many of the other, maybe any of the other reporters. So they lost this sort of ignominious, ugly playoff game in the rain to the Minnesota Vikings here at the Coliseum, and it was the end of Joe Namath, but we weren't sure if he was going to go somewhere else and try another year. So on the Monday after the loss, I went out to the practice field, and I happened to catch him at his locker, and nobody else was around, and I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he had a duffel bag, and he was filling it with all the contents of his locker, and he said, "I'm done." I said, You're completely done?" "Yep." I said, "Could I write that?" "Yep, if you want to." I said, "Would you talk to me about it?" "Not now, but I will later if you'll meet me at so-and-so." And it was what they used to call a Southern California Fern Bar, like sort of an upscale bar in Long Beach where their practice field was. So I had to wait a couple of hours. I went there, and this was in my little red wine period. So I walk in, and I'm stunned to find they've pushed all the tables together in the middle, and he's got all these friends I did not know, like from his apartment complex. I don't know who they were. And they were having a retirement bash with maybe 20 people around tables. So I sat next to Joe. Now I got to try to interview him in the middle of a bash, which is, as you would know,
I know.
not the best. So, "What are you drinking?" I said, absent-minded, red wine. Now, in those days, they are holding the paper for me because I've told them I got the Joe Namath retirement story. This is the Los Angeles Times. They're going to put it on
Huge.
what we used to call 1A, as in the front page of the paper.
Not
And
just the sports.
Not
front
the
page,
sports,
yeah.
the front, across the top, because he was a big deal. He was obviously a big deal to the Jets and won the Super Bowl and held his finger up after he guaranteed the victory. But he was a big deal in L.A. because he was Hollywood. He was a movie star as well as a football star. So I'm sitting next to Joe. "What are you drinking?" "Red wine." So the server brings me red wine, plops one down, and I start to nervously sip the red wine with no real plan. And I'm trying to ask him questions, and I'm trying to jot notes, and it's just crazed. And I'm looking at my watch. I'm not going to make the deadline. I'm not going to make it. She comes by again and plops down a second red wine, and I sipped to the bottom of 2 red wines. True story. I said, "Joe, I got to run." He said, "Great. Do you have what you need?" I said, "I think so." And he said, "Well, I've enjoyed working with you, blah, blah, blah." I said, "I got to go." And I got up to leave, and I took one step, and I fell into the table behind us. That is a true story. And I fell on my back because I had lost all my equilibrium from 2 glasses of red wine. And Joe Namath stood over me, and in that weird sort of Alabama accent that he developed while at Alabama, even though he was from Pennsylvania, he said, "Son, I believe you're drunk." That's what he said to me, quote unquote. And I was just dumbfounded because I never thought of being drunk. I grew up with 2 drunks, and the last thing I ever wanted to be was drunk. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, I got to go write this story. I got to drive downtown. He said, "You can't drive." I'd never even thought about not driving because I was never going to be drunk. So he helped me up. I shook his hand. I went to a payphone. This is pre-cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
I called my sports editor, and he knew me very well. I was like a son to him, and he knew I didn't drink. And I said, "Bill, you're not going to believe this, but I'm drunk." And he said, there's no way. I said, "It's a long story, but now we're in trouble." He said, "Okay, do you think the story will keep for one more day? Do you think," in those days we had a rival paper called the Herald Examiner here in L.A., "do they know about it?" I said, "I'm 99% sure they don't know." He said, "I'm going to make an executive call right now. I'm going to say no, let's hold the story. You take your time. There was a mall across the street. Go to the mall, drink some coffee or whatever you can to try to sober up, walk it off, drive safely home, sleep it off, and then I want you in here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to write this story, and we'll do it the right way. And we were not beaten on that story.
Nice.
It lived to see the light of another day, and it led the paper the following day.
And
But
you
so-
never picked up a drink again.
I got drunk once in my life with Joe Namath. How cool is that?
That is a cool story.
If you're going to get drunk once, you got to do it with Joe Namath. And as God is my witness, I have never tasted alcohol since that moment. Not once. That did it for me. Because the horror of falling down the same, precipice off the same cliff that my parents did was, what are you doing? Well, it was thoughtless nervousness. It was just, I was a product of a deadline. But that's what, couldn't that happen?
All of the elements were set
Yeah.
up perfectly
Yeah.
with the front page story and
Yeah.
everything for that to be
Yeah.
the thing, the moment, the last
Right.
moment.
And I hated the way it made me feel because I didn't have my motor skills anymore. I like to think I'm pretty athletic and pretty in charge of my body, and I care about my fitness, and so I lost control. I fell into the table. I had to apologize to the guy I crashed into behind us.
You were lucky that happened.
I was very lucky.
So you and your dad would mostly fight about, was it mostly about drinking or were there other things too?
I don't want to go too deep here, but my dad was in awe of my mom, and he married up because my mom was a knockout. And my mom paid her firstborn, me, too much attention, so he was always jealous of the attention she paid me. So he spent all of our time together trying to knock me down. And he was physically abusive until I got to be 16, and then I wouldn't take it anymore, and we had one last big battle, and I told him, if you push me, I'm going to hit you back this time. And he pushed me. He was really drunk, and I decked him, and that was the end of our relationship. But it actually felt good because I took a lot of stuff from him. As a little kid, he would slap me around with his wedding ring, slap me in the face and bruise my face. He was an evil creep of a dad, but I did learn the drive and dedication from him because I saw him never miss a day of work. But we had no relationship because every time we talked, he would try to belittle me or cut me down or discourage me from playing sports, at which I was good at sports right away, every sport. I was big for my age, and I was athletic for my age. And I learned by the time I was 10 years old just to leave him be, just go your own way. And my mom didn't want to be a mom, so starting around 8 or 10, every Friday and Saturday night, I spent the night somewhere else. And she didn't care. She never even really knew where I went. But it was great independence because I'm independent by nature, and it taught me self-reliance. So I slept in other beds, other places with friends, and their moms mothered me more than my mom did. And again, I got her charisma, and I got her. She was a good public speaker, actually. She was the PTA president. It was all for her. It wasn't for me. But
Or for her mom.
And her mom. She wanted to impress her mom. And the other one good thing she did for me, and it was all for her mom, was we had one rule and only one rule, is that Sunday morning at 9:15, we were all going to be in the car, and she was going to take us to church. Well, it's her mom's church. So she just wanted to show her mom, my kids are going to church. My father never went one time, but church was good for me. It gave me a foundation. It just gave me like a framework of this is right and this is wrong. And it kept me from going south because I could have, because I had no rules. In fact, the other funny story is, ironically, My mother pushed my father to buy me a motorcycle when I turned 14 and could get my license. And no one in my neighborhood had a motorcycle because the other mothers were horrified that I got one, because then their kids wanted a motorcycle. Nobody else got one, but I got one. Why was that? Because my mother knew she wouldn't have to take me anywhere anymore, that I would be mobile, and she wouldn't have to fret over, oh God, I got to pick him up or I got to take him somewhere. So from 14 on, I was completely independent, and it was great for me.
When did you figure all of this out? Like what your mom's MO was, like what was going on for her? This came later, right? You did some reflecting later in life?
I don't know. I think I was smart enough that by maybe 10 or 12, I realized that I couldn't trust either of my parents, because she also competed with me because I was always good in school and the teachers loved me and I was smart, and I take no credit for that. I was just born smart. I didn't do anything. I was born smart. I liked to read, and then by billion to one luck or a God thing or however you want to define it, my sophomore year in high school, I randomly fell into an English class that was the only English class of the day taught by the journalism teacher at that is the biggest high school in the state of Oklahoma, called Northwest Classen. It's a great high school, and it was huge. There were almost 1,000 kids in my graduating class, and her name was Mrs. Burdett. And so she, on the first day of school, said, I need everyone to write me a one-page book report because I want to see if any of you can write, because she was just looking for potential journalism help, writers, editors for her paper. It was called The Shield, because we were the Knight, so it was called The Shield, the twice-a-week school paper. So I'd never written any more than my name, but I read a lot. And, of course, I chose a sports autobiography, but I didn't just write a book report. I thought it was awful. It felt like the guy had written it overnight. And so I wrote a one-page scathing review of this book. And a few days passed, and the bell rang one day, and as we all got up to leave class, she said, Skip Bayless, I need to see you at my desk. And my friends looked sideways like, what did you do? Because she was a terror. She was as intimidating a teacher as there was at our high school. She looked, her name was Elizabeth Burdett. She looked a little bit like a prettier Wicked Witch from The Wizard of Oz, but she had the features and she had this high screechy voice, and she was she was horrifying, and she shredded a lot of kids who didn't live up to her standards. So I'm walking to her desk thinking, I don't know what I did wrong, but she took one look at me and said, you are coming into journalism. No, I'm sorry, I'm not. I got no interest. Nope, you're coming in. I said, I don't want to do that. She said, you don't have to write headlines or edit stories or help fold the papers or any of those things the other kids do. You're going to write me a sports column twice a week, whether you like it or not. I said, I play sports. She said, I know you play sports. You're going to play and you're going to write about the sports. Well, she saved my life. She changed my life because she would not take no for an answer. And she taught me everything. She taught me to be fearless. She encouraged, she had me write movie reviews for the paper as a sophomore and junior in high school. And she entered me into a scholarship that no one from west of the Mississippi had ever won, called the Grantland Rice Scholarship at Vanderbilt University. And I won, thanks to her. And I closed my eyes and went to I'd never even seen it. And I had a girlfriend who was a year behind me that I did end up marrying her, but it was just so hard to leave all that behind and go to Vanderbilt. Greatest thing I ever did. So when I won the scholarship, my first thought was, I'm free. I escaped my father and my mother. And I did. So I went on.
What a major story, and all the right things happening to offset all the wrong things.
I was blessed.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that teacher, I mean, you already had it inside. There was something inside of you. That's a wonder too, right? Because with your parents the way they were, how did you develop? You could have just followed their path.
I'm not sure either my parents graduated from high school. I'm not sure of that. My mother got married when she was a junior in high school to a serviceman who went away to the war, and I don't know what happened to it. But my father was from a small town in sort of rural Oklahoma called Okmulgee, and so there was no writing, there was no education in any of their backgrounds. They didn't encourage me in school, but the other break was that the worse it got at home, the more I threw myself into my studies, and then it became my writing, and so I made really good grades. And then she forced me to go take the SAT, because to go out of state you had to take the SAT, so I didn't know anything about the pre-SAT or any prep for SAT. I just went and took it.
You aced it?
Blind, and I aced it.
What'd you get? Do you remember?
I don't remember. But I did well. The counselor told me, wow, you did really well. I got into Vanderbilt. It's hard to get in. You have to get accepted to win the scholarship competition. So I got accepted first. And they don't even choose it until May. I know kids now, when they're like juniors, they already know. Don't you go through the whole process a year before you go away to school? Or
know what then? If you're gonna get in?
Like you choose your school?
No, you don't know until you're senior.
Senior, okay.
Yeah.
But
it could be early. It could be like December of senior year.
Okay. Well, they don't even pick the winner of this scholarship until the first week in May. They do it after the Kentucky Derby, and they ask select like national columnists to come to Vanderbilt, and they've culled down the entrance to maybe 10, and I've done this before since I won scholarship, and then they pick the winner. So you don't get notified until like May the 7th or 8th. So I came in from baseball practice, and my mother, as usual, because she helped my dad some at the restaurant, but they just left me barbecue for dinner. Like if she knew I was baseball, she would just leave barbecue on low in the oven, like ribs or beef or something. And I came in, and she had scribbled a note. Somebody called from area code 615, blah, blah, blah. And I knew 615 was Nashville, Tennessee, where Vanderbilt is located. And as soon as I saw 615, I said, I'd forgotten about it. I said, I just won this scholarship. So that was my moment of, I just escaped.
That's so major.
And that launched me. Because that scholarship, at a time it was really difficult to get a job. I got an entry-level sports writing job at the Miami Herald, which just springboarded me to the LA Times, and then I was off to the races.
But how did it springboard you? Like, did you try to get these jobs? Did people read your stuff and say, did they recruit you, or what? Okay,
another quick, crazy story. In my junior summer, I went home to Oklahoma City, and I worked for the local paper there called the Daily Oklahoman. I grew up reading it, and the columnist was my hero, my idol. And I had gotten to know him when I was in high school through the journalism teacher. She sort of forced and forged the relationship with him, and he wrote me a letter of recommendation that helped me win the scholarship. So he said, well, why don't you come and intern with us, and I'll let you write any and everything. And I did. I had the most fun that summer. I covered everything. He let me write features on anything that I chose. It was the all-time joyride. And I just lived at home, and I got to live like a professional sports writer for a summer. And it was so much fun that at the end of the summer he said, look, we can't pay you very much, but we would love to have you come back and work full time. I said, done. I'm going to do it, because I didn't know any better, and I didn't have any parental guidance. And my whole senior year at Vanderbilt, I thought, I'm just going to go back and work for the Daily Oklahoman. 3 days before graduation, my dorm room phone rang, and it was this columnist from the Daily Oklahoman who said, look, I can't sleep over your decision. you can't do this. You can't come back here. It's a dead end for you. You're so much better than this. We can't pay you. They were going to pay me $150 a week. He said, it's just so beneath what you can be. I said, his name was Frank Boggs. I said, Frank, I don't have a job. I'll get you a job. You just have to hang in there with me. I said, graduation's in 3 days. I'll get you a job. One day later, he had me an interview at the Miami Herald, which was a nationally known and highly regarded newspaper. And the following day, which was the day before graduation, I day tripped flying to Miami to interview, to take the Knight Ridder test that you have to take. Mm-hmm. And at the airport, before I boarded the return flight, they offered me the job by phone, and I was at the Miami Herald. So he did that.
Yeah, yeah. So
Another
it is that
incredible
too.
Blessing.
There are people, when you get the
Yes.
right people who believe in you, that can make all the difference, right?
Because if you go home to Oklahoma City, then I don't know what happens.
Forget.
I
You
don't
know what happens.
You just get
you don't
stuck.
Not know what
you don't know
happens.
enough, and you say, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I might still be the columnist there. I don't know what I would be. Who knows?
Well, on behalf of the world, I'm glad it turned out that way for you.
It did.
You know?
I just feel incredibly blessed. And I never, TV was not in my realm of thinking, because nobody was really in TV. Sports writing was it. The local TV anchors were seen as sort of second-class citizens in those days. The print reporting was everything
right?
in the locker room. When I went to Dallas and covered the Cowboys for a while, it was all about the print reporters. And then right on schedule, I fell into TV, and because of my mom genes, my not my literal genes, but the genetics,
Gotcha.
that I found that on camera I could really emote, and I knew I had strong opinions from my column days. And because of what she gave me, and I'll tell you one last quick story, she also forced me for 3 years to do this because her mother made her do it. She took me at age, I'm going to say 9, 10, and 11 to what were called speech lessons, as in public speaking lessons, because my mom was a good speaker and her mother was a really good public speaker.
Did your mom work?
Just no, but she was always like
so
PTA
PTO
president.
and stuff like you were saying. Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother was in an organization. It's the female side of Masonic. It's called Eastern Star. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Okay, so she became what's called my grandmother, the worthy grand matron of the state of Oklahoma, and it's a big deal where you have a big installation, and so there's a lot of public speaking involved in that. And my mother and grandmother were incredibly charismatic and outgoing. And I was not as outgoing, but I could be on cue because I had them in me. Mm-hmm. So she took me to a woman in a wheelchair who taught public speaking named Miss Miller, and she was just great because you had to memorize a poem or an oration every week, and you had to go give it to her, and she would teach you to speak publicly, how you need to be the electric fan, turning to the audience left and right, and how to emphasize the words, and how to emote. And then at the end of each maybe 6-month period, you'd have to do a recital with all the parents in some big assembly room, where you'd have to get up and give your best poem or oration. So I got very comfortable with public speaking. And then my grandmother would, at all of her big extravaganzas, she would always have her grandson do one of these stand-ups for her, like do a poem. And so at 12, 13, and 14, I'm speaking to 500 people, and it became very second nature to me.
Yeah, that's a gift. Weird gift to have gotten.
Weird gift.
Right?
I've asked, my mother's not with us, she died 2 years ago, but in later life, I said, why did you make me do that? I don't know, my mother made me do it.
So
okay,
wild.
well, thank you. Because it served me so well, because I like to speak to big groups, and I'm not at all intimidated by being on camera, knowing that X thousand million people are watching. It just doesn't bother me at all. I just forget about it.
So just tell me how that first thing came about, though, how somebody suggested going on TV.
In 1989, there was a show on ESPN called The Sports Reporters that was every Sunday morning, and the moderator was the late, great Dick Sharpe, who became a very close friend of mine, and he was a creative dynamo who also did politics and movies and did a lot of things for ABC. He was Mr. New York. He could get me tickets to all the big Broadway shows, and we had connected through various stories he had done. I was in Dallas at this point, and he called one day and said, "Hey, we would love to have you on our panel show, The Sports Reporters," which is the same as Meet the Press or any of the morning political shows, Sunday morning. And it's a little more sedate than what we do. It's not really, it wasn't a real debate format. It was more of a discussion format. And because I had some insight into the Dallas Cowboys and they were always the hottest story, sure, I'll come up. So they had me up once, and it really worked. And I was comfortable with him and them. It was two other panelists, and the producer was sold, and so they started to have me back regularly, and it just started to take off. And then in 2004, the guy who was running ESPN, named Mark Shapiro, I had known when he was just a PA, producer's assistant in Bristol, when I did another show for a long time on ESPN called Prime Monday, ahead of Monday Night Football. And he was running the network by then, and he had started his signature morning show. It was called Cold Pizza in New York City. And it was a morning variety show loosely based on sports. They tried to have a Good Morning America of ESPN, and it wasn't working because I assume the people who wanted to watch Good Morning America probably watched Good Morning America, right? So it was a bust. They couldn't even get any ratings. They were still at zero. So 3 months in, he called me and said, "I love what you do. You have a real spark to you. You're so good at debate on TV. You're so strong in stating your opinions. I need to add a debate component to try to save Cold Pizza. Would you please come to New York and do this? I don't know if it lasts 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years." And I closed my eyes and did this because I wanted to see how it would feel to do daily TV. And it worked. And it started to tick up in the ratings. And there was a regime change at ESPN, and they pulled every plug that Mark had plugged in New York City, except for ours. And Cold Pizza was moved and rebranded to Bristol as First Take. And then a few years passed, and a guy named Jamie Horowitz took over just as an interim showrunner on First Take, and he loved what I did, and he just blew it out and took out all the old morning TV show, variety show components, the pet segments and the ballpark food segments, and he said, "Debate works." And we went all debate all the time, and in the hallways at ESPN, many people predicted that we would fail and it would be the end of Jamie Horowitz's career, and it simply became the greatest rating success story in the history of that network, given its time slot and its degree of difficulty, because it just exploded as an all-debate show. So I do thank my mom for a lot of that, because she unwittingly, inadvertently gave me all that.
That's incredible. It's such a story. It's so interesting. It is such a story. Your mom and your dad growing up, and your teacher, and the guy at the paper in Oklahoma, and everybody, and PA, everybody.
Everybody. There's a lot of big, good breaks, and you know, and I know, you just have to have them. Sometimes you make your own. You made some of your own, but you still have to be at the right place at the right time, and I was. I also have never met anyone who worked any harder than I work at what I do. So that served me well also, because once you cracked the door open, I barged through the door.
Well, that's what they say about
Right.
what luck meets opportunity
right.
and hard
Yeah.
work or whatever.
Yes.
That's what I was saying before, too. It's the same thing. It looks like, oh, you have a dream job or whatever else, but it didn't just happen. If you weren't working as much
Yeah.
as you did and taking the opportunities and barging through the door,
Yep.
you wouldn't be where you are.
That is true.
All good.
There.
Thank you, Skip.
I took up another hour of your time.
Now I will edit this down, and it's all going to
I
be...
don't know how you're going to do that, but
I'm going to do it. I've done it before.
Okay.
But this last part to me is really interesting.
Okay.
And I'm glad we got
you wanted
it.
to know real me. That's
Yes.
all real.
I see that. I
Yeah.
feel it. And I appreciate that you shared it.
Okay. Good. You
That's
got
the
it.
real deal. That was Skip Bayless. Catch our video online at reallyfamouspodcast.com. Pick up Ernestine's book, Balls, How to Keep Your Relationship Alive When You Live with a Sports-Obsessed Guy, and watch Skip on Undisputed every morning on Fox Sports 1. Thanks for hanging out with me and Skip Bayless. I'm Kara Mayer Robinson. Talk to you very soon, and get ready because I'll be talking to an icon.